In October of 1993, Bakara Market in Mogadishu, Somalia, was the site where one of the two Black Hawk helicopters was downed in the Battle of Mogadishu, which led to fierce fighting for many hours in that area. And Ridley Scott wrote about that in his book, Black Hawk Down, A Story of Modern War. There's a great scene in the book where a hardcore U.S. Army Ranger colonel is in command of a small convoy of Humvees, and he's trying to get back to base, and there's mortar and rocket fire going on all around him. At one point, he stops the convoy, and he brings some wounded on board, and he throws a dead driver off the truck, and he yells at a bleeding sergeant who's standing in shock nearby. He says to him, "Colonel," or he says to the sergeant, "get back into that truck and drive." And the sergeant says, "But I'm shot." And the colonel yells back at him, "Well, everybody's shot. Get in and drive." That's a great metaphor for life. Everybody's been shot. Everyone's taken a hit. Everyone's been hurt. We're all the walking wounded. We come today and celebrate the Feast of the Epiphany, and we hear that wonderful story of the Magi. And that story offers us another great metaphor for life. You see, the Magi were on a journey, and there was a long journey, and at the end of the journey, they were actually disappointed. They had followed a star, and they found a stable. They were looking for a king in a mansion or a palace, and what they found was a child in a stable, a poor child of an unwed mother. And they were discombobulated. It was not what they expected. They had to redirect themselves. And like the sergeant he was yelled at, they could have been told, "Well, everybody's disappointed. Get going, don't retreat, redirect yourselves." Great metaphors for our lives. Because in so many ways, everybody in some ways has been shot. So many have taken a hit. Everybody's been hurt at some point in our lives. At some point in our lives, we're all the walking wounded. We're all disappointed at different times in our lives. And life isn't what we always thought it would be. It isn't what we expected it would be. In our work lives, many have been downsized and fired, unappreciated, underpaid, overworked, and overstressed. But you can't go back the same way, just like the Magi. We have to redirect ourselves, change our plans. In relationships, many have been hurt and betrayed, neglected and abandoned, disappointed just like the Magi. But we can't go back the same way. We have to redirect ourselves. In our personal initiatives and personal efforts, there's been failure and rejection and resistance, disappointed like the Magi. We can't go back the same way. We have to change our plans. We have to redirect ourselves. In family life, many have experienced disagreement and distance, illness, death, much disappointment, like the Magi. We can't go back the same way. We have to find a new way. We have to redirect ourselves. In our own bodies and minds, many have been nailed by sickness and disability, deterioration, disappointed, like the Magi. Can't go back the same way. We have to find a new way. We have to redirect ourselves. Even in our experience of faith, many people have experienced doubt and disillusionment, lots of disappointment like the Magi. Can't go back the same way. Have to redirect ourselves, have to find a new way. Because life is seldom what we expect it to be. So often, we're all the walking wounded. We're all disappointed in many ways. And the challenge for us is not to stay on the sidelines, not to retreat, not to give up. So often in our lives, we have to change directions. We have to do things differently. We have to find a new paradigm. We have to, even if we're wounded, get back in the truck and drive. You see, the central problem with our lives so often, even though we've experienced all these setbacks and disappointments, is not that we've experienced them, is that we've not done the best that we could with what we have. And that's the challenge for us on this Feast of the Epiphany. Just like the Magi. They followed a star and found a stable, and they had to deal with a poor child in a stable, not a king in a palace. And they were able to see an epiphany even in their disappointment. And that's our challenge, to see epiphanies even in the most disappointing experiences of our lives. In the last couple of weeks, we've heard a lot about Urban Meyer, the head coach of the Florida Gators, arguably the brightest college football mind. At the age of 45, he's having to stop and pause. His health is challenging his future. He stated it. He said, "I've ignored my health for years, but recent developments have forced me to reevaluate my priorities of faith and family." He is now challenged to redirect his lives. Even some undefeated basketball teams have to change and redirect themselves, and sometimes they lose. Much disappointment. There's a young fellow by the name of William Wiseman. He's presently a sophomore at Bard College, and he's from Hastings on the Hudson. He gave an interview to NPR, and he told his story that when he was in 4th grade, he had to leave his school because he is dyslexic and couldn't correctly spell his name. So he had to go to a new school for 5th grade that specialized in what's called language processing disorder. And he spent the next 4 years learning how to learn so that he could go back to this high school that meant so much to him, because leaving was a tremendous disappointment to him. But he told NPR that that disappointment really focused his life. And he told us something very interesting. He said that during those 4 years, he challenged himself. And in one way that he challenged himself was with the Rubik's Cube. He said he was so frustrated with that, trying to figure it out, that he took it apart and that he rebuilt it. He said, "I believe that sometimes you have to look deeper and in unexpected places to find answers. I noticed that I can talk or focus on other things and still solve the cube. There must be an independent part of my brain at work able to process information." And when he did this, when he challenged himself with that Rubik's Cube, he also realized what a great conversation piece that was, and as a young fellow realized that it attracted many young girls into his life. But he also now, what he does is he carries that Rubik's Cube in his backpack. He says it's a reminder that I can attain my goals no matter what obstacles I face. He said, "The Rubik's Cube taught me that to accomplish something big, it helps to break it down into small pieces. I learned that it's important to spend a lot of time thinking, to try to find connections and patterns. I believe that there are surprises around the corner, and that the Rubik's Cube and I are more than the sum of our parts." So we come together this Epiphany weekend of 2010 in this new year, and we are very much like the Magi. They were on a journey, and we are on a journey. They met with disappointment. We meet with disappointment all the time. They had to redirect and go a different way back. We often have to redirect our lives, and that's the challenge of the Epiphany. We're all shot. Everyone has taken a hit. Everyone's been hurt. We're all the walking wounded at different times. Maybe each one of us needs to, at times, carry that Rubik's Cube in our pocket. Because the central problem with our lives is not that we've experienced all these setbacks and disappointments, but that we have not done the best that we could with what we have. The Magi followed a star, but they found a stable. But that stable ended up changing their lives forever.